Alright, hello there, thrill seekers. That was the Pygmy Sitar. I bought this like 10 years ago and played it for a little while, then it was in storage for ages. These were apparently made by some guy in England who only made them for a couple of years, and I've tried to get in touch with the company that made them, and they don't answer their emails, and their website is gone, and so I don't know. But I think it's a kind of interesting little instrument. And in case you hadn't noticed, I'm at my new place. There's Ziggy enjoying it in a small town in California, about 45 miles east of LA, where I have moved to. So today I want to talk about something that appeared in the comments section in the video I put up last week about Buddhist ideas about abortion. I said in that video, which I made 3 years ago, so memory is probably not so great, I said that there isn't a general sort of agreement among Buddhists as to when life begins. And somebody protested in the comments section that yes, there was, and directed me to an article by Ajahn Brahm. And in case you don't know who Ajahn Brahm is, I'm not that familiar with him myself, so I had to go look him up. I know the name, but I'm not, intimately familiar with all his details. He was an Englishman born in 1951 who, when he was in his late teens, became really enamored with Buddhism, went off to Thailand and studied in I believe it's the Thai forest tradition of Theravada Buddhism, and became a monk, and he's been a monk all the rest of this time, and I believe he now lives in Australia, or that was what was current in the last thing that I was able to find about him. He wrote an article called "When Does Human Life Begin in This Body?" Ziggy enjoyed it, and I would just like to read you the article because it's pretty short and comment on it. So here we go. What did the Buddha say? It's the first thing he begins with. 1. Human life begins when, in the mother's womb, the first citta, mind or thought, arises, when the first consciousness manifests. 1b. Bhikkhus, or we'd say bhikshus, means monks. The descent of the Gabha, and in parentheses it says misleadingly translated as embryo by Bhikkhu Bodhi, takes place through the union of three things: the union of mother and father, the mother is in season, and the Gandhaba, a stream of consciousness, is present. 1c. If vijnana, consciousness, we say vijnana in Sanskrit, were not to descend into the mother's womb, would namarupa, means name and form, take shape in the womb? Certainly not, Venerable Sir. Namarupa, this is his notes, I guess Ajahn Brahm's notes. Namarupa equals feeling, perception, contact, will, attention, and material form, rupa. 1d. Namarupa, a name and form, and consciousness are like two sheaves of reeds standing leaning against each other. If one were to remove one of those sheaves of reeds, the other would fall. So, with the cessation of Namarupa comes cessation of consciousness, and with the cessation of consciousness comes the cessation of Namarupa. Quite interesting. That echoes something that Nisargadatta Maharaj says. Similar, he says that consciousness and form are one and the same. And number 2, what did the Buddha mean? So Ajahn Brahm is going to explain it to us. 2a. Human life begins when the stream of consciousness enters the embryo fetus and the first consciousness manifests therein. 2b. Such an arising of consciousness is caused by the combination of three conditions: parental union, fertility, and a stream of consciousness being available. 2c. The above causal link is not necessarily instantaneous. Buddhist causality includes results that appear a long time after their cause. A prime example is, when there is birth, there is old age, sickness, and death. It is a mistake to assume that the stream of consciousness descends into the mother's womb at the very moment of parental union. Such a belief would beg the question, into what does the stream of consciousness descend? Into the lucky one of the millions of sperm, or into an egg that might well remain unfertilized? The Buddha meant, this is Ajahn Brahm, that some time after parental union, with the other two factors also being fulfilled, there is descent of the stream of consciousness into the mother's womb. Point 1d above shows that there cannot be consciousness without feeling, plus perception, plus contact, plus will, plus attention, plus material form, nama-rupa. He's saying nama-rupa means material form. When one manifests, so does the other immediately. I think he's enjoying exploring the new landscape here. And point 3, when does a new human life begin? 3a, the embryo designates the unborn being in, yep, that's what it says, the unborn being in the first 8 weeks of development. The fetus designates the unborn being after 8 weeks of development, so that's his definition. Embryo equals first 8 weeks, fetus designates after 8 weeks. 3b, a single embryo may split into 2 or more viable embryos after a certain number of days. Prior to such an event, there cannot be two stream of consciousnesses coexisting in a single embryo, nor can a single stream of consciousness split into 2 streams. Okay, that's what he says. Such propositions are excluded by the Buddha's doctrine of pratitya samuppada. Either a second stream of consciousness enters one of the divided embryos after the separation, or 2 karmically connected streams of consciousness enter the twinned embryos at the same time shortly after division. In either case, this shows that the stream of consciousness can descend into the mother's womb several days after parental union. 3c. The Buddha consistently stated that human life in this body begins when consciousness first manifests, in bold letters, inside the mother's womb. The Pali word here rendered as manifest is patubhuta, which also means to be open, visible, apparent. To be precise, human life in this body begins not when consciousness first exists in the mother's womb, but when it first shows its existence. Shows is in bold letters, in the mother's womb. These 2 events, I believe, are simultaneous, he says in parentheses. How does consciousness first manifest its existence? Point 2d above states that when consciousness first manifests, then nama-rupa, name and form or material body, also shows its first appearance. 2 essential parts of nama-rupa are Vedana, feeling, the ability to distinguish between painful and pleasurable or neutral sensations, and Cetana, will, deliberate reactions to such sensations. So when Vedana, which he says is feeling, and will first manifest in the unborn being, then one knows that nama-rupa, name and form, has first manifested, and when nama-rupa is first manifested, then consciousness is first manifested, and human life has begun anew, with an exclamation point. In conclusion, only when the embryos fetus first shows sensitivity to pleasure and pain, Vedana, and first shows will, such as by a purposeful shrinking away from a painful stimulus, has consciousness and nama-rupa manifested and new human life started. Further discussion. Such a definition for the beginning of life has been argued tightly from the earliest teachings of Buddhism, those as close as we can get to what the Buddha actually said. Thus the definition has textual authority. 4b. Such a definition is pragmatic because it gives us a discernible measure by which we can know when a human life has begun anew. Procedures such as the ultrasound scan can convince neutral observers that the fetus at a certain stage of development shows experience of pain and moves deliberately, but before such a stage does not manifest feeling or will. Neurologists can also confirm that prior to a certain stage of development, the fetus's nervous system is absent and therefore pain and pleasure cannot be felt. Such a definition is workable. 4c. When there is no surefire method of discerning the beginning of a new human life, many will err on the safe side, meaning they will push the beginning of human life impractically early, even to the stage of parental union. The above definition avoids such sloppiness based on fear. 4d. The ethical quality of karma has as much to do with the happiness or suffering that one deliberately inflicts upon another. When the other is incapable of feeling pleasure or pain, such considerations become irrelevant. Indeed, there is a widespread revulsion at viewing a film of an abortion where the fetus manifests pain during the procedure, but such a revulsion is absent at the destruction of an embryo in a petri dish that does not manifest any feeling at all. 5a. There's a lot of these. The above definition clarifies the ethics of destroying fertilized human ova that are yet to be implanted in the mother or using them to begin a line of stem cells. Since these embryos do not show feeling or will, then consciousness has not been manifested, so it is not reckoned as human life. Number 5. Scientifically speaking, the nervous system has certainly not developed yet, and therefore such an embryo is incapable of manifesting consciousness. Other ethical considerations may be relevant here, but certainly not that of destroying a human life. A further clause in the Buddha's consistent definition for the beginning of human life is the location of the manifested consciousness, in the mother's womb, in bold. Thus, there is a strong logical argument that states that even if consciousness did manifest somehow in an embryo in the lab, it still has not appeared in the mother's womb, and therefore does not fulfill the Buddha's definition of a human life. Conclusion. Embryos outside the mother's womb are not reckoned as human life, and thus the ethical considerations specific to human beings do not apply. So I want to make some comments on that. The Theravada tradition... What are you eating, Ziggy? What are you chewing on? Alright, Ziggy found an old bone, and I'm not sure how long it's been out there or how good it is for him, and it had a little, gray, awful-looking meat on it. So I gave him a little chew toy. Anyhow, my comments on that. The Theravada tradition is a tradition which regards the Buddha's words as recorded in the Pali Canon, the earliest. Some people argue that they're not the earliest, but supposedly the earliest scriptures of Buddhism, as being authentic and authoritative, which to me is somewhat similar to the way Jews and Christians view the Bible. So it's a sacred text, and it can be questioned to a certain extent, but you can't question that it's wrong. You have to accept that it's correct. I don't know how hard line they make this. They probably don't make it quite as hard line as certain Christians and Jews, but it's a similar sort of approach. And I remember Nishijima Roshi talking about going and discussing some stuff with some rabbis in Israel when he made one of his visits to Israel. And he was saying, now I see the problem of basing a religion on ancient texts. And he didn't really elaborate much on that, but I can kind of see the deal. You're going to forever argue what those texts mean, and you're going to you're deferring your authority, your own sort of authority, to those texts. Now, I don't see Ajahn Brahm doing that exactly, but that's a kind of a tendency that you have in that tradition. So, you might want to kind of watch for that. So what do we make of all of this? Let's say that the Buddha really did say this stuff. Well, did he know this? Did he have some kind of experience during his, awakening or during his various meditations of remembering when he descended into his mother's womb? I don't think that's impossible, but I think it's kind of unlikely, and even if it's true, you're kind of basing your whole thing on one guy's memory and interpretation of what he remembers having happened. And I regard the Buddha as a great person and a person who was seriously enlightened, but obviously, because I'm a Buddhist, but I don't know that he had perfect knowledge, and I don't know that his interpretation of whatever he experienced was absolutely perfect. But what does this all mean? Well, I don't think you're going to base a governmental decision on what the Buddha said, unless you have a Buddhist theocracy such as existed in Tibet before the Chinese took over. Maybe you get it there, but you're not going to get it in the United States or anywhere in Europe. So, there you go for that. It's not going to go anywhere in that direction. All I can say is that I offer it to you, and Ajahn Brahm, I suppose, offers it to you as here's what they say, and you can take it and you can believe it, or you can accept the logic of it or not. I think it's interesting. I don't take it as received holy wisdom that must be true because the Buddha said it. I'm not sure that the Buddha even said it, and even if the Buddha said it, because of the tradition I come from, which is deeply questioning of anything, especially religious authority, and this is not just the Buddhist tradition I come from, but the sort of punk rock tradition I come from, I kind of go, well, even if the Buddha said it, okay, that's what he said. To me, I don't really have any skin in the game, as they say, but maybe some of you watching do, and maybe you wonder, and so I just kind of offer it for you there, and we'll see what you think of it. And I thought it was interesting, and maybe you thought it was interesting too. If you want to contribute to me doing more interesting stuff, you can go to the URL you are seeing on the screen below, which is hardcorezen.info/donate. That is hardcorezen.info/donate. There you will find links to my PayPal and Patreon accounts. Those are my main and usually only ways of making a living and affording this place that my wife and I have moved into. So I appreciate your support, but as always, this is offered for free, so you don't gotta donate if you don't want to donate. I'm gonna work on this location of the camera and stuff some more, and we'll see where that goes. Oh, by the way, also, if you want to support me in another way, my new book, The Other Side of Nothing, is basically starting to show up in shops and online now, even though the official release date is May 10th, so you should be seeing it there soon, so you can order that and get a little bit of money when you order that, or when you get it from your bookstore. I like supporting independent local bookstores. There aren't many in this area, so I think you should support them. Ziggy's made a lot of cameos in this video, so I won't make a special cameo for him, but there he is, enjoying the yard and enjoying his little chew toy. So we'll see you later. Have a good time all the time. Bye.